There he is. Bas, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed. Bas, you're looking well, and I'm eating into your time. So what I'm going to do is leave the stage and leave you to it. I will be muting myself and hiding my screen, although I will be here. So if you want to call me back, just say so, and I can pop back in a second. But I'm excited to hear your talk. I think it's going to be fascinating from what you told me yesterday. So let's go ahead and do it.
All right. So if everything is correct, everybody's seeing my presentation, right? I hope so. Yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up. Thank you. That's the part of the technology that's always scary. So I'm going to be talking to you about a tale of two futures of work. And the photos are chosen not by accident, still or running, graag. So, 2020 was the year of both the coronavirus as well as the Black Lives Matter movement. And both of them, I think, will change the future of recruitment forever. And I'm not saying this just like that. I'm not taking this lightly. Both will have an impact. Looking back, this has changed everything. And I'll explain to you why. The coronavirus has made remote work, and remote work by definition then at some point will mean gig work, at least a very big part of what we're doing. Yes, some people are saying we're going to be moving back towards the office, and yes, we will have a hybrid office, but work from home will be essentially a part of what we're doing. And if you can work from home, you're going to be using gig workers all around the world as well. That's just inevitable. And I'm not talking about gig workers like your Uber driver or your Deliveroo worker. I'm also talking about the gig workers who have been working on Kaggle. If you don't know it, those are the smartest data scientists in the world who will just solve your problems for a fee if they solve it. Your fee needs to be really high. Incentive, they will innovate your business, etc., etc. We will move to a world of more remote and more gig work. And that's going to have massive impact on the labor market. The other part is the Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter movement is all about fairness and equality. That's the only thing it's about, being treated fairly. And you know where being fairly starts? In the labor market. And right now, we have as unfair and unequal labor market as we, probably could have. It's a horrific scene all in the Western world, and we will be changing that. Now, the two of those combined will change a lot of things. One of them is urban-rural issues. I mean, let's face it, there's a massive problem with urban-rural differences all around the world. Look at the UK, and who can testify to this? I mean, London said stay in the EU, the rural parts and the small towns mainly voted exit. Look at Ireland. Dublin said, yes, we want abortion legalized. The rest of the country basically said no. Here in the Netherlands, we see it as well. I mean, we recently had our general elections. We have basically Black Lives Matter political party in the parliament now with one seat, almost completely voted in by people in Amsterdam for a massive part. We also have the Farmers' Party, who I can tell you will have almost zero votes from Amsterdam and the major cities. But if we're going remote, if we're going more and more to the rural areas, we will see a diversion of talent. We will see more people going to rural areas. We actually see here in the Netherlands that the number of searches for genuine rural houses from Amsterdam has increased significantly. We've seen a lot of people leave the city, and this time they're not leaving the city for the suburb, they're leaving the city for genuine rural areas. This has really great implications because all of a sudden a lot of money can be made in those rural areas where schools were closing, hospitals were getting further and further away because there were simply not enough people living there. we might actually solve a lot of these issues. The thing is, this impacts recruitment, because all of a sudden, if you're only going to be staying at your office 1 or 2 days a week, you can live somewhere else. And this means that you will be looking for other places as well. But to give you another example how we need to realize our biases in recruitment, we know academic study from the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands that the stronger your accent, the less money you make, because unconsciously we have the bias that an accent means less intelligence. Now, how are we going to fix this in interviews? Well, maybe we need to figure some things out. I'm going to be expecting that labor market discrimination will be an issue on the on all political agendas. And to be honest, I think we will see EU legislation in 2022, 2023 at the latest, giving really guidelines on how not to discriminate, on how you should be hiring. Probably similar to American ones, haven't been perfect, haven't been really well checked upon, but interestingly enough, the US has less labor market discrimination than all of the European countries except for Germany. Think about that. Why? Because they actually have laws against it. Here in the Netherlands, we had one conviction, one for labor market discrimination ever. And the only reason this company got convicted was because he actually gave an interview in the local newspaper saying, of course I didn't invite her, trucking is a man's job and she's a woman. And that quote got him convicted. All the other ones have been thrown out. And there's international remote hiring. Like I said, if we're not at the office anyway, why should we not hire people, possibly gig workers, internationally? All of these things combined mean that we need to change the process. And for the first time, we've got momentum to change the process, because we're not saying, okay, we're going to change it because we've always done it wrong. Now we have the argument, things are changing. We just can't expect people to show up for an interview, especially in smaller countries like the Netherlands or Belgium. We still have every interview face-to-face. In the US, they had phone screens before, and now they can say, okay, we've got a better way to do a first screening. We need to change the process. And I'm going to give you a lot of case studies in a moment about changing the process and the results for quality of hire. Because the problem isn't AI when you're looking at the current media, it's the CV. Amazon didn't scrap his AI recruiting tool that was biased against women because it was AI, but because they used a completely faulty data source, CVs. And I have never seen a single algorithm which was able to not be biased when it was selecting on CVs. I've seen several which are not biased if they're selecting on the tests that Hoon had been talking about in his introduction. There isn't a single scientific research which was able to find even a correlation, I'm not even talking about causation, a correlation between quality of hire, quality of performance, and anything which was in a resume. The resume just tells you what somebody did, for how long, and for who. But we know from science that the only thing that matters on how well somebody is going to do is how well somebody did. The years of experience do not matter. Basically, if the length of experience and the years of experience matter, I would have won the Tour de France last year because I cycled more kilometers than Pogacar ever did. But my resume doesn't tell you I did it at a lot lower space, and I took 2 years or 20 years more to get there. A resume doesn't tell you that. A resume just tells you what I've done. So, case studies. Or now let's start with, there are two futures of hiring I see. You can either hire on skills or on potential. Basically, are you hiring Cristiano Ronaldo, as Manchester United did at age 17 with awesome potential, or are you going to hire him like Juventus did when he was already one of the 2, 3 most skillful players ever in the world? Both are okay. Both are completely fine. And you can actually use them simultaneously for either different jobs or for people in your team. Just realize what you are hiring for. And the thing we're now doing is, if we're hiring on potential, we still expect a lot of skills. And if we're hiring on skills, we still want people to grow. Why do we do that? I don't know. Figure out, do you need this person to be skilled, or do you need this person to have a lot of potential? And measure on that. And I'm going to give you a lot of case studies. First of all, skills hiring. Blue Cross in Australia. Some case, basically, we had a pandemic, as you might remember, or we're still having them, but this was in early time of the pandemic. And they had to double their staff as an elderly care organization because all of a sudden, everybody with a cough needs to stay home. Yes, you heard that right. They had to hire 4,000 healthcare workers in a month time. Go figure, 4,000 healthcare workers in a market where healthcare workers are already pretty low on applying. What they did was they also built a skill-based assessment. And I talked to their head of TA, and he told me, we did something we thought would get us in so much trouble when we changed the process. We didn't give the hiring manager a single chance. The hiring manager was done away with in the hiring process. He said, we had a skill-based assessment. We checked what type of healthcare worker are you? Are you a registered nurse, or are you just a care worker? We had an assessment in place looking at what skills do you have, and do you embody the type of work. It was basically situational judgment. Do you deal with situations the way we expect you to deal with situations? Yes, okay. If you pass the assessment, if you pass all the requirements, here are the slots you can subscribe to, and you're expected at this facility at that time. They had zero complaints from hiring managers. And they doubled their staff in 2 months' time at the start of the pandemic, simply by not allowing bias to come in, and by having people tell them, what can we do? How good are we? Am I somebody to serve the meals within an elderly organization? Am I going to bathe the elderly, or am I registered nurse and am I allowed to put a vaccine in somebody's arm? If so, these are the jobs we have at hand. These are usually 4-hour or 8-hour shifts. Go there. And you're expected there. No hiring manager was allowed in. They changed the process. They completely got rid of their hiring problem. So, another case, criteria. It's a car dealership. It's a assessment tool who has a lot of car dealers in Southeast Asia as their clients. And they're actually able to assess which brand fits the car salesman. Yes, you've heard that right. Which brand best fits a car salesman. And every dealership which started working with them increased their sales by at least 15, most of them by 25%, because they are able to match the people matching the clients. Basically, they're matching bias with bias, but that's okay, because as a salesman, you need to be able to identify with the people buying it. And they told me, interestingly enough, that, for example, a Honda salesman in Thailand is a different one than a Honda salesman in Singapore, because there's a different brand awareness. And they were able, because they had so specific sales data, and that's the beauty, of course, about sales. Sales is really easily measurable on quality of hire, because basically sales is about one thing, especially with car sales, selling as much as you can. They said, okay, here's the sales data. We go back into our in this case, psychometric data, basically what type of character do you need to be, and this works. There are also awesome cases, but I'm not going to share them with you, about, for example, hotel sales, because, well, let's face it, nobody's currently hiring in hospitality. But another really, really cool case, actually presented 3 years ago at TA Live, which was a predecessor of ToTalent Live. It was from Durensport from Belgium. They did an awesome skill-based assessment for truckers. Yes, you hear that right, truckers. What's on the resume for a trucker? I'm allowed to drive a truck. I have my driver's license. That's the only thing which is important on the resume. That's a checkbox. That's not a resume. Are you allowed to drive a truck? And potentially, depending on your country, how heavy is the truck allowed to be? But what they did was they also checked on quality of hire. How did they check it? Well, they said, okay, there are 2 main criteria which we think are really important. Or actually, they started with one massive criterion. Basically, are people on time? How fast do they ride? Are they on time? But then they also checked with how many tickets do they get, because you really don't want them to get fined. That's expensive. And then they found out that one of the main reasons why people were late was because they got into accidents. So they were checking this. They knew who were good and who were less good in their HR data, because they could simply see how many tickets does a single driver get, how many fines, and how many accidents. And they checked with all kinds of psychometrics, and it turned out that conscientiousness, basically, are you driven to eye for detail perfection, as well as, and you're not going to be surprised, spatial awareness. And because they started checking older applicants on spatial awareness, they were able to have such an insane decrease in accidents that they paid for their assessment tools by the lower insurance premiums. I'm not joking. They were able to lower the number of accidents their drivers got into because they were checking their skills, basically not their driving skills. You're not going to have somebody, they simply did an assessment on how conscientious are you, how well is spatial awareness, and bam, they paid for it by lower insurance premiums, because all of a sudden they weren't in as many accidents, and their clients were very happy because their drivers were there when they were supposed to be, because they didn't stay 5 minutes or 10 minutes later for lunch, for example. That's conscientiousness. A beautiful case study from the city of Rotterdam. And the reason this is so beautiful is because it shows the way they did it. They decided to hire a recruiter. Yes, a recruiter. And they had an assessment test. They said to everybody, give us your resume, but then all of the applicants got the assessment. And before they said, okay, before they decided this is what the qualities a recruiter within our company needs to have. For example, you always have 5 hiring managers asking you for where's my perfect candidate. So you need switching. You need to be able to quickly switch between tasks within this organization. And what they did was they made 2 hiring committees, and this is why this is such an awesome case. They said, on one hand, we have somebody looking at the assessment data, and on the other, we have a hiring commission looking at the CVs. And we're going to invite 5 people to the interview stage. And 3 of them, both hiring commissions agreed upon. They had decent CVs and good enough scores, so all 3 were invited. But 2 of them were outliers. The one was the only applicant scoring 100% match on the skills assessment, but a crap resume. And the other one had a perfect resume. I literally heard a quote that they said, we should be proud that this guy wants to work for us. What an awesome resume. They decided, but he scored, interestingly enough, lowest on the assessment. He was the only person scoring way under 50% match. They decided to hire them both. And of course, I'm telling you this because the assessment guy rocked the interview. The guy with a perfect resume. After the interviews, people asked, how the on earth did he manage to get a resume like this? The only thing he's been doing is managing agencies. How can he have such an amazing resume? They hired this guy based on the assessment tool, and he's been working there for 2-3 years now, and I only hear his colleagues with raving reviews. He's awesome. He's one of the best guys we've ever hired. Now, could be that he didn't have the resume despite his skills because he has a Muslim name? Could very well be, I think. So this is why it's so important to not just look at a resume. They've now moved, by the way, the same system to potential hiring, because they're now also selecting their trainees, especially their IT trainees. They selected first on skills. Do you have an IT education? Then they decided, we're going to look at their strong and their weaker points, and we're actually going to modify the traineeship a bit to help them develop their weaker points instead of giving everybody the same course. I love that. I love the fact that they're now using the potential of skill-based assessments to see, okay, this person needs more development on, for example, his presentation skills, and this person needs more development on her communication skills, I don't know, or assertiveness, stuff like that. So that's, they've moved from skill-based assessment in basically senior jobs, and they said for our trainees, use it for potential-based. So we're going to potential-based, future fit hiring. One of the most amazing case studies I've come across, and it's been so underpublished that I mean, they won the Queen's Award in the UK for most inclusive employer a couple of years ago, Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton used aptitude testing. They got rid of all, and I mean all, educational requirements for their traineeship, for their internships. And they said, we're just going to do aptitude testing. And it turns out that having your A levels, which is a UK thing of being really good at in studying, doesn't mean you are good at something. Actually, your grade in math doesn't mean you're good at calculating. Or actually, having a good grade in math means you're good at calculating, but having a bad grade in math doesn't mean you're bad at calculating. Having a bad grade can also mean you have a broken home, you have 2 jobs, you have a drunken father who kicks your ass every evening. With this, they were able to actually see with aptitude testing who's good, who can do this. And they're hiring a lot of people from the wrong side of the tracks, a lot of people from neighborhoods where, and I quote their former head of recruitment here, our seniors, our partners would not dare to park their Mercedes because it would be gone by the time they got out of a client's meeting. They hired those people, and this is a case study which started in, if I'm not mistaken, 2012, 2013. So they were able to have a lot of data on how well it went. The people they would have never hired when they were still hiring on educational requirements now have more billable hours. Yeah, you hear that right. They are more lucrative employees because billable hours is what matters in an accountancy firm. And they have a longer tenure. They stay longer, on average a year longer almost. So basically they make a lot more profit. And the other unexpected fact is they brought an entire new client base from those neighborhoods, Papa Mom stores. Grant Thornton is big in SMEs, from those neighborhoods where the partners will not park their cars. So it's the most profitable thing they ever did to become a more inclusive employer. Go figure. If we're all talking about inclusiveness, think profits. Another fantastic case study on future fit, and I'm almost there right now, 5 more minutes. Air traffic control. The Dutch air traffic control started this. Recently, the Germans took it over. I know the Icelandic is doing a lot about it. What they did was they started out when they were hiring, they put again, the educational bar higher and higher and higher, because they had a dropout rate of about 75% of the people they hired eventually didn't end up with the right education, because they educate all of the air traffic controllers themselves, of course, because they're the only employer for air traffic controllers. So there's only one education, their own. What they found out was that there are two things that you need to have as an air traffic controller, which you just don't need to have in order to finish university or any education. As you can see on the picture, you need to be able to watch 5 screens at once. You need to be really good at fast switching. You need to have basically be able to multitask, as they call it. The other thing is stress resilience. You won't think this is a strange thing, because let's face it, stress resilience is the thing which you need if there's a stressful situation, and that's what an air traffic controller is for. Two things you do not need for education. So what they were able to do was they used a tool, interestingly, the same thing as the city of Rotterdam used, but calibrated it completely differently. They were able to assess what are the qualities that our people that do meet the requirements, that are in the tower, have. Can we figure out basically their brain configuration? Yes, we could. And right now, they got rid of all educational demands. They found out that you actually need some, because you do need like this big of a bookwork in rules and regulations by heart. So they now said everybody who finished high school, if you finish high school, we know you can learn a bit of the regulations. Everybody who finished high school is able to apply, and by testing, and they've managed to lower the dropout rate from what I said, around 75% used to not make it through their training program. Now it's less than 20%. Millions and millions of euros saved by selecting on Future Fit, and they opened it up to an awesome lot of more people who are just not good at sitting in a education, sitting in the university, but are really, really good at this job. One of the final cases I want to talk to you about is the Dutch military. And what they're now doing is basically what you might say selecting in on Future Fit. The military is using games, and I'm not saying game-based assessments, I'm talking about genuine games like League of Legends, Minecraft, Warcraft, those kinds of games. And they are saying to their applicants, you share your game profile with us, we'll tell you which job will fit you within the Dutch military. This is a pilot project, but they've done a lot of research, and I think this is just awesome. What they're simply saying is, if you have these kinds of badges within certain games, you obviously have certain qualities, because you need to have those qualities to get the badge, and we need those qualities in those jobs. And they've actually tested this on the air battle controller. That's the person you're seeing right now. An air battle controller. Those are the people who, if your planes get into a fight over, for example, Afghanistan and stuff like that, help the pilot. Again, a lot of different qualities. And they made an assessment on what qualities do these people need. One is, for example, spatial awareness and fast switching between tasks. And then the supplier that helps them with this selecting in tool said, okay, wouldn't it be awesome if people played those 4 games? Can we have access to your air battle controllers? Turned out 100% of all air battle controllers in the Dutch military, for fun, were playing the 4 games that they needed to have to be able to select on this job. We are playing for fun the games we are good at. So yes, what we play and how we play those games can help us select on Future Fit. And the fun thing is, a lot of those really avid gamers would never get into through normal channels, through studies, to educational. But by showing talent in games, they do. So there are two features of hiring: current skills or future fit. Both are fine as long as you define quality and start selecting without bias, which basically means start selecting without me. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time and attention. Usually I see the people sleeping in my room, but right now you're probably sleeping behind your desk. Thank you.